Lovely. Hi, everybody. I'm sorry we were a little bit late. We had some technical difficulties. I always say technology should make your life easier until it just screws everything up, no?
And
So,
does it.
welcome, Franklin. It's so great to see you. How
Thank you,
how how are you?
Louis.
So I hear you're
Thank you, Louis. Happy New Year to you. Appreciate the indulgence. I will link to technology issues related to the prosperous and year for all in the NGO, nonprofit sector. Uh, we are just moving to the new year, so that's part of experiencing 2022.
I mean, I think something we have to get used to is that change is going to be constant, right? It's
Absolutely.
not. It's not. So we have Franklin. We have colleagues from the industry, from IRC, from Joe Phillips, from Wisconsin, from we have Rise Against Hunger. So we really have a broad section of, as you said, the third sector today. It's so nice that everybody's kind of interested in hearing what you have to say.
Well, no, thank you so much, Louis, for inviting me to be with you and the colleagues. I look toward this as almost as a forum, a conversation where I'm sure I'll learn from what others are seeing in 2022 already this early, the visibility they have into what may be trending, what may be coming up in front of us, and as well as what happened in 2021 to some extent. And so, again, looking really forward to this. I'm part of the donor participation project. I believe it's super important to keep in mind our donors, the retention, and also to express to them the love and care that as charities or institutions we have as they still individuals between individuals and bequests, we're looking at over 75% of private giving in America.
It's absolutely incredible. So Susan Empfinger is saying hi to you. So nice to see you again.
Hi,
Um,
Suzanne.
so that's kind of what's great about the industries. What's great about you, Franklin, and I'll let you kind of explain the scope of your work now, but is really your commitment to education, to learning about new trends for both yourself and your teams. But if you'd like to tell us about your role with AARP, I think that would be really interesting.
Thank you, Louis. I should have introduced, but you introduced me. I'm Franklin Guerrero. I'm currently the Vice President for Philanthropic Services, which really entails mayor gifts and what we call also gift planning, but also a perspective of the work we do is service. And for AARP Foundation, which is part of the enterprise of AARP, every older adult 50 plus in the country, in the nation, nationwide, is someone that we have interest, is someone that we care for. And even if you are choosing not to support ARP Foundation, but we can be of service to you, guidance, provide philanthropic advice so that the individual can work with their financial or legal or tax advisors. We see that as part of our mission. And if there's a gratitude from the donor and a gift comes to us, fantastic. Obviously, like everyone, we have individual performance objectives and metrics and goals and commitments that we have to meet in order to support the work that we do in AARP Foundation. I have a team of 10 individuals that report to me, working on systems and reporting, also donor and prospect research. And then I have a director, a true partner, Heather Sherman, who works closely with me as well. And we have 7 frontline fundraisers, one of which does something that we're working on, that we're trying to learn from it, which we call the warming, nurturing pool officer, which is someone that works with those donors that are not yet ready, to make a gift of the significance of what we define major gift, but we want to keep nurturing them, warming them when they're ready. And there are many, many reasons why they may not be ready at the moment. And that officer, one officer's work with that major gift pool. And I think that that is one of the things that could be not necessarily new, but something that other organizations should look into.
How this is really interesting, Franklin, and thank you for introducing yourself. Sorry about that. How does this officer differ from somebody who traditionally you might think is focused on discovery?
The difference is that we know two things. One, these donors are not yet giving at the level that could be referred to a major give officer. And so, even though they have the capacity, the way that they have been giving is not yet at a level that we should assign to a portfolio of one of our frontline major give officers or philanthropic officers. That's number one. The number two, we may have information from them that they are involved with another campaign, maybe their alma mater, maybe with another nonprofit, maybe they're going to a transition in life, and it's not the right time for them to make a major gift to the foundation, and so therefore they could go into that warming pool for the organization, because otherwise there'll be too many that could be assigned to a front officer, and we try to use, to some extent, that is traditional, obviously, an RFN. A recency is always an indication of satisfaction. You buy a pizza again if you like that pizza once, right? Or you buy a type of vehicle and you develop a loyalty to that brand, and you may buy it a second and a third time, right? And so we're looking at recency. We're looking also at the frequency in which those gifts are happening, and always the money amount. And so there's a threshold for us to assign an individual to a major gift officer from line
Mhm.
philanthropic advisor or officer in our group. And so this warming pool person typically has a really large pool right
That's
now.
what I was going to ask.
Yeah, it's in the hundreds, and the treatment will actually look more like mid-level kind of giving. Is a lot of online, a lot of discovery phone calls, and depending on what this our officer discover, then a determination is made with me and the director of philanthropic services whether or not the individual should be assigned then to a give officer, given the size and the ups and downs of another of give officer portfolio.
This is so fascinating. And Natasha De Luna, hi Natasha, has a really good question. She's interested in hearing about the transition of these warmed up prospects or individual donors to a major gift portfolio. How do you
So
handle that warm handoff?
so usually that warm handoff is obviously the warming pool officer or nurturing officer describe themselves as that, and that the contact and relationship with the donors is that is the nature, and that they may be assigned to a representative or an officer that will work with them on a direct regular basis. um,
So you're very
typically
transparent.
Yeah, typically we also try to make sure that there's at least two contacts with the donor, and they could be email or they could be phone calls. This we really got this on during the pandemic, so we haven't been traveling, with few exceptions, to meet donors one on one. So it's happened on the phone, and it's happening digitally. Virtual meetings, whether it's Zoom or other technology, and also emails. And the beauty of this is that you can reach to a lot of people that way as well, more than traveling one by one. And so that is the nature. And after those two contacts and this discussion of the management team, then we assign to the give officer, and obviously the warming pool individual will refer or will indicate to that donor that so and so will be now their officer. And then the whole process of obviously cultivating and maturing a major gift takes place.
Very, very, very interesting. So your team, Franklin, works with potential major donors across the nation, internationally? What is the geographical scope? of your
The
work?
the scopes is the United States. The AARP is a U.S. National organization. We do have the reach to work, if you will, with some of the territories. In that sense, U.S. Virgin Islands and Puerto Rico, and also Guam is part of that. And then the 50 states, and 48 of those are contiguous, right? And then you have Alaska and Hawaii. So it's a nationwide presence and work. Interestingly, in my background, I did a lot of work with both for international causes, charities, and also with international donors, and so that's also near and dear to my heart. But for AARP Foundation is a nationwide USA work.
Okay, so this may be a terrible question, but since you have such a broad overview of maybe the donor psychology for major donors across the US, how have the last 12 months been different and how have they been the same? Um,
Interesting. And one of the things I wanted to discuss later, as some of the things that I would recommend people to look into, is I did recently last year the certificate in philanthropic psychology, led by Jane Chan, a group, and also based in the Institute of Sustainable Philanthropy out of the UK. And the last 24, 12 months increments have been interesting. I think during the first year of the pandemic, people were to some extent concerned, scared. There was uncertainty. Life was throwing us, all of us, a curve that we were not expecting. And as the time elapsed and passed, people were beginning to develop, and I know this is used quite a bit, resilience to the fact that there was a new normal. And ideally, we were working to a new normal that was better than the old normal. And I believe, and then in the last 12 months, I saw an idea of tiredness, desperation, sometimes a bit born out, like what's happening, what are the things that I can do. But what the data is showing, at least at the end of 2020 and in some cases in 2021, is that there was donor resilience, that giving actually continued to increase, that people were hopeful. Remember, Omicron really didn't hit till late uh, 2021 December. We knew about it in November, but really, the numbers bubble up in December and January, and even now in January. So I see donors. I have the opportunity to see and meet a few of them. They're ready to re-engage. But it's interesting. One of the trends, and I was looking at this, is endowment funds. If you're working on endowment funds, the pandemic really planted the idea in donors of responsibility and sustainability. And if they care for a cause, what if they were not around? What if some of the resources were not available? How could they really make sure that charities or the nonprofits they care for had sustainability? And one of them, some groups are reporting, like the Winkler Group, that they are seeing a shift on more interest in endowment funds. Will it last? Will 2022, and if we get to some sort of different normality, change that? It remains to be seen. But that's one of the things that we are seeing. I'm hearing and seeing, and obviously it's a limited experience, is that donors are really looking forward to re-engage, to visit sites, to meet their philanthropic advisors, to be in a closer relationship again beyond virtual and digital engagement with their charities. I see resilience. I see people are ready to have the weight of their lives back, so to speak.
So interesting. And Susan brings up a really good point about donors being more interested now in supporting local causes rather than maybe international or nationwide causes. Have you experimented that? And I think about the surge in support for food banks, etc.
Right. No, I think that definitely people want to support what was around then, and we saw, increases in donations in the social services area, human services area. We in AARP define our work as human services, and in many ways, the appeal that we make to organizations, even though we just don't speak national, we say nationwide, and we refer to our local impact and the work we do in the 50 states. We have work and presence offices in the 50 states. And then the foundation has also programs in many, many of the states. And we also, as a foundation, fund other work that we claim as part of our impact as well. So, no, I agree. There is a desire to strengthen the fabric of care, the fabric of keeping people whole in communities around the country. But I also seen significant support going for international charities, particularly those that are related on health issues, global health, refugees, and children.
So interesting. And I guess it certainly applies to the subset of people that care deeply about causes. And your area may not see the broad kind of membership numbers, but do you have a sense that this is an overarching trend for everybody, or just for those people that really care about something and are willing to invest? Kind of your major donor prospect pool. That's something I always think about, right? Our view, because we're so focused on that major donor pool, are we missing out on a bigger trend or a bigger picture?
So one
Do you
of
have a
the
feeling about how that is?
So one of the trends that is happening, and it was on my list too, is we're having, and this is not new for anyone in the sector, but we're seeing that there is a concentration of and consolidation of larger gifts by fewer donors. Uh, Many charities are having less people in their file. That doesn't mean necessarily that they lost revenue. They may even have more net revenue than before, but it is concerning the attrition and the reduction, and therefore our donor participation project, as you founded this, Louis. But we're having more income, more money coming from less donors. I think that Pareto law of 80-20, in some cases is 90-10. In our case, we're seeing more like a 70-30% of donors. And so one cautionary tale is that we have to work in major gifts. I try always to work closely and understand the work of my colleagues in, call it direct response or mass fundraising, mass marketing, because the ideal major gift donor lives already in your file. It's someone that already made gifts to your organization, and they are now in a process of either self-discovery or discovery by the team that does major gifts work to be cultivated and mature into that group of major donors. But it is important to understand that relationship, because changes in tax law in the United States, particularly since 2017 with the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act of 2017, we're seeing an erosion in mid-level giving. So people are either giving in what I will call lower gift levels, and then you have a concentration because the law really helped the ultra wealthy. But again, always important to work with the direct response or mass fundraising, annual giving, or annual fund is called in other places, to really build up your major donors group out of that file, out of the people that are already your donors. Always showing impact, always showing growth. I seen in our work, and we really started focusing on a philanthropic blended gift or mayor and gift planning work in the last 3 or 4 years at the AARP Foundation. We are seeing a trend. We're still young in our process, but a trend that we're having more larger gifts as we have increased our communications, our engagement opportunities, our the focus of the work of the team. And so we're seeing a trend growing in the right direction in terms of larger gifts for the organization in the last 2 or 3 years, to be sure. In terms of, we Even as a foundation, we have a large file, over 1.5 million donors. Most of them are lower levels donors, but we done the right research, the analysis. We have really large numbers of people that can be cultivated and mature into mayor gifts, and that's the work that we have concentrated over the last 2.5 years to do for the foundation. Did I address your question, or did I miss something, Louis?
Beautifully. And I don't want to, yes, wonder, and in fact, you inspired a couple more questions. But if anybody has questions in the chat, if they'd like to respond to, are you working with kind of with a blended gifts proposal model? And we'd love to hear from you. Or do you have any other questions for Franklin? Please feel free to chat them in. But what I was going to um, ask you about, and I just lost my train of thought. But oh yes, I had a really good question for you, Franklin. So if you could add, so what the trend that I see is that all the frontiers are kind of, the silos are kind of dissolving, right? So you used to have your marketing and your major gifts, but now you have really kind of major gifts marketing, and and maybe you had your engagement and your donor relations, but now you have this nurturing role, which is a little bit of that, but with a major gifts focused. So my question is, if you could add one full-time employee to your staff, if you could invest in adding only one person, what would your focus be?
It's interesting. I debate on this myself. I sometimes think I would like to have someone that will be doing a lot of I would say frontier work on technology and how to develop the right algorithm for emails and solicitations at the major gift level. And I wish that was out there. I know that there's some groups that are working on that. It gets a little harder because the proposition is really a bigger ask. It's a major gift, and that I believe requires. I remember working with a major donor whose company specializes on ads and sales online, and he said, Franklin, you buy, and again I use this example, a pizza online, and you have no problem. You may be disappointed with what you get and never buy it again, but rarely, and I know there are sites that are working on this, you do like a car purchase entirely online. And I know Carvana is out there, and some people are beginning to do that, but still the dealership experience, the driving, the testing is really important. And similarly, there are things like that with Mayor Gift. So if I had one more individual that I can ask to my team, it will be exactly to work on, and I define it this way, on stewardship. And by that, I mean on informing and working with donors on a customizable way to tell them that we deliver on the promise, meaning we ask you for X dollars and we use the dollars this way. And here is a report, here is a memento, here is even a special token uh, from the program that you supported, and really work on making stewardship memorable experiences for the donors. So to activate all of the good chemical reasons why people feel good and experience well-being and joy, and that therefore they want to come back at experience because they feel that they have been loved, and because they have been loved they can give love to others. And that is really the principle of the psychology of philanthropic psychology, is to work definitely in the area of love, is to work in the area of giving, and also working on the area of well-being for people.
Love that. And I think if you can find ways to do that at scale, right? I mean, I've kind of said it like the probably annual funds should disappear, direct response teams should disappear, and it should be some type of stewardship, donor relations team that works in mass, right?
Hmm.
Um, Using this technology that you mentioned. Um, Natasha has a question. We have found that new donor acquisition remains challenging in the current environment. Can you share some effective strategies?
Interesting. And still on our work, the acquisition, because I heard what you just said. We're not in that world yet where all those silos have disappeared. So the donor acquisition is usually done in most shops through the direct response team. Um, and in our case, that's where it happens. We do the development of those donors into mid-mayor gifts and plan giving, that whole pyramid process, if you will. It remains challenging for many reasons. One, there's more charities out there. There is, if you will, more noise, additional channels. And also, as I mentioned earlier, we are having demographic issues and concentration of wealth. And when those all of those come together, you have less new donors happening. In our case, right now, at the and I'm speaking from previous experiences, but at the AARP Foundation, and this is hard to apply to other places, but it's not a secret. Our donors come 98%, 99% of them of the membership. AARP is a 501c4, a membership organization of 38 million plus members. And then the AARP Foundation is part, is an affiliate, and we have north of 1.5, depending how you look at the numbers, we could go up to 2 million donors. And all of them, again, with a very small group of them, are existing members of the 501c3, of the membership or organization. And so for us, we do have where to go, a secure list, so to speak, to acquire donors. But I know by conversations with the folks on direct response internally, it is always a challenge because it's that first gift, converting that member into a donor. If you look at it, our penetration is probably only about 5-7% of the membership. So it's really challenging, and there's not secret sauce out there. Each charity has to work on its own to really fine tune the message. I think working with your communications team is essential. Making sure that the brand aligns with the fundraising, as Alan Clayton will say, always telling the truth we're told. Make sure that you're telling people what are the theory of change that you have, what are the problems, and what are the solutions, because people and individuals will give to um, solve causes and solve problems rather than solve the problems of a charity. But again, we should not take away the structural challenges that we have. As I said, we have less. The demographic is working against us. The tax laws are working against us with the changes on the law, and the AGI increased from 50 to 60%, reducing the basic that we used to have threshold to provide people the tax exemption and monetary benefits of making contributions. All of that went from 6,000 to 12,000 in 2017. So there's a number of things that are working against us. I wish I had some easy solutions, but none. I mean, I think it's hard work. Acquisition is hard work, and again, it involves, again, the brand. It involves your mission, your theory of change. What are the resources that you have to use channels to diversify, to have dynamic campaigns that really are across the channels, multi-channel, etc. Is hard work, and I reap from those benefits because those are the donors that we can work on to develop and mature into mayor gifts donors. I
So
hope that helps.
interesting, Franklin. I think it is, and the conversation in the chat is really active. One thing that we've discussed in the donor participation project, and if folks here want to join, the link is down there, is also trust, right? There's a erosion of trust in institutions and in nonprofits, and that is another of those structural factors. So,
That's true. That's a good
you
one.
know,
That's a good one. And that's why the whole communications, the ability to be transparent, to tell the truth, to report back on the money that people put in trust with us. Is the basis of the whole system. And I may use, this is from my boss, David Whitehead. He says, when you go to the supermarket, he said, you buy mayonnaise and you take the mayonnaise, you no longer think that that is your money. The money now belongs to the grocery store where you bought your butter or your mayonnaise or your bread, right? And in your mind, unless it's rotten and really, really bad, you go back for your money. Otherwise, it's no longer your money. With giving and charitable giving, the mindset of many donors is, this is still my money. I gave it to you, isn't to you. And until you deliver on that promise, I believe that's my money. And rightly so, to some extent. If we tell them the money will be used for this, it needs to be used for this. And if not, there got to be consultation and even the opening to say, if we may need to refund you, because this program we cannot carry on unless you were to be okay if we do ABC with the funds. So I think transparency, trust, again, is a public way of showing love.
I love that. So you've mentioned love, you've mentioned courses in donor psychology that have been influential for you. I know you yourself and AARP have a very, let's say, strong or supportive policy for education, for allowing your team members and yourself to position yourself as thought leaders, etc. I would love for you to speak about that, and I think it can be helpful for others too.
So yeah, one of the fascinating things at the AARP is we're required to, and the foundation too, to have what we call 50 university learning points. That's part of my individual performance objectives. And there are a number of opportunities that are free, meaning that the organization, we've been large, can provide training on a number of things. For instance, customer journeys or donor journeys, the voice of the customer. We could do all kinds of trainings on diversity and equity and inclusion, et cetera, et cetera. And so those will count. It would also count the webinars that you will go for free, but we also make sure that we have funding available for my team, but other members of the entire development department beyond mayor gifts or philanthropic advisors for at least one annual conference. And you could choose AFP or you could choose one around charitable gift planning. And similarly, we want all of our officers to be members of AFP. Um, and be part of a culture of learning, of reflection, of challenging yourself, having this type of conversations and participations where one can really be part of a community of learning, be challenged, be asked tough questions or good questions. And we look at the myriad of opportunities, even reading a book on fundraising on the subject matter or other subject matters pertaining to our work will also count toward your points system. But it's a culture that really emphasizes the need to innovate, to learn, and to reflect, and come back to new ways of addressing and approaching your work.
Okay, so I want to invite people to ask tough questions today, because Franklin is actually might even get a point or two in his internal system.
That's true.
So you're actually doing us a favor. I have a question for you, and it's concerning DEI. Um, I think it's pretty obvious what the benefits are, right? So, uh, and yet I I feel like there's a long way to go, and especially in organizations that deal with donors being of a certain demographic, it looks like we're mirroring um, our donor pool, whereas probably we should be leading in some ways. I don't know. Do you have a view about this as a sector as a whole, as to what the focus should be? There's so many areas to focus. You can try to focus on your hiring. You could try to focus on your practices internally. Um, do you have a view as to what would be most effective, or what's missing?
So, thank you for that question. I belong to, after George Floyd's death and internal reflection, the AARP enterprise decided to have an advisory council on diversity, equity, and inclusion. And I'm part of the original group. Our terms actually expire in a few months in the summer. And so I've been putting a lot of reflection on this. Obviously, myself being a man of color, Afro Caribbean, Dominican, Puerto Rican mix. Um, Obviously that bears on me and how I go about my work, my existence, my multiplicity of if you will identities. I'm a father, but I'm a professional. I'm a neighbor. I am a migrant to some extent as well, et cetera, et cetera. So I believe it is important in an America that is changing, that we know where the future is heading, and um, the ropes of the past are still ringing and tolling some bells, but the future, the data is clear. The demographics are changing now and will change drastically in the next 10, 20 years, where the labor force is coming for this country, who will be the people in mid-level careers and then future leadership in the S&P, in the Fortune 500s, et cetera, et cetera. The country is changing. So diversity in terms of ethnicity, in terms of race, in terms of gender and generation, need to be really still at the center of the work we do. In the planning that we're doing for fundraising is inescapable, that is changing, and for some sectors of our industry, we need to really care about that and be in the forefront of that. And so a diversity of in terms of multiple intersectionalities, but also I believe in terms of age is important, generational, to keep in mind, and how people will be responding to fundraising appeals, to fundraising messages. It's critical. Last year, I did a presentation with two other colleagues on how to approach Hispanic donors, for instance. And it's one of the groups that is growing in the country in terms of demographics. Also, wealth is growing in that country. I'm sorry, in that group. But there are other communities that we need to pay attention. And so for us at the AARP Foundation, we look at the hiring that I do. I make sure it's a requisite that we have a diversified pool of applicants. Otherwise, we don't move forward. Can be that we don't find people that are different, right? Or the people that have diversity. And so we make an extra effort. That doesn't mean we necessarily go with expert or that particular decision, but we want to make sure that that pool is diverse and reflective of the country. We also make sure that our vendors and suppliers really look the way that the country looks. The granting that the organization makes also, we look to the idea and the facts that it be a diverse pool of applicants, and we make sure to reach out to communities that perhaps traditionally don't apply for grants, to include them in our process. But I in terms of the work of Mayor Gifts, while wealth in the country still is very reflective of our history and where wealth has been traditionally, and we all have read and know about the wealth gap, and we as a foundation do all kinds of work around understanding poverty and wealth inequities in the country and so on. um, we know that there are, and one of the things that I want to do with my team, and one of my team members, we're gonna actually is gonna be doing some about 2 3 months work with the diversity, equity, and inclusion office, so she can learn a lot of that type of work, marketing that we do it for those diverse communities, and then bring that back to Mayor Gift, because one of the things that I want to use technology is to really then go deep and look at diverse people in our file, and make appeals and have conversations that are customizable to those communities, so that we raise money, as someone would say it uh, um, in color, and that our listening and our communications keep that in mind as we make fundraising appeals that are not just generic, but also can be customized to different audiences. That's a challenge, and maybe in a year or two we can have a conversation how that pan out.
Franklin, I hope you never have hiring problems because, boy, I'd go work for you in a heartbeat. How inspiring. Thank you for sharing this. Cherry Ann asked in the comments, what are some best practices on ensuring vendor diversity and representation of diverse communities among your vendors? Is that something that the organization looks like, or your team, or other subunit?
So we're fortunate to have, obviously now, a clear policy on diversity, equity, and inclusion. We have a team within the enterprise that does a lot of the analysis and work for procurement. So usually I may have a vendor, and as we all know, you could do sole source justification, but we try to avoid that. And what we try to do is to have RFPs, and we there encourage obviously women, people of color, 50 plus, because remember AARP is older adults organization. So we want to see that community represented in the pool process, and then the procurement team goes to work and work with us to make sure that we promote within the right networks the opportunities, and they have been strong participants of the whole DEI process in the organization. So that's how it looks like. I can inform, I can recommend, but we'd really like to have RFP processes that bring a good pool of candidates. I remember we had a process where we were studying the DAF, whether or not we should have and host our own DAF, donor advice fund,
Mhm.
which is something we haven't spoken. But again, those are growing meteorically. But to go back to the question, what we did is to make sure that until we had women and people of color participation, we kept the process open during the RFP process. But that's how it works internally. Policy,
This is
practice,
amazing.
and a professional team that does the procurement for us.
That's amazing. So we're nearing the end of the hour, and I want to give people a little bit of time to go on to their 1 p.m.s if you're on the East Coast. Franklin, just a related question. How do you coach your own team members in managing all these dynamics that maybe we're more aware of about now? The power dynamic, the maybe diversity, where as gift officers we're maybe in a different place or a different identity from our donors. um, how do you help your own team members, given all this knowledge and and experience that you have, um, navigate those?
So first of all, as I mentioned, we really encourage education and continuing education of the team members and participation in national conferences and other training opportunities. Secondly, we do have a regular calls. I have twice a month meeting with my extended team, and we there have discussions not only on the progress of the work that they're doing, but also the work that needs to be done around those issues and the preparation that we all need. We also have regularly meetings with other colleagues around the enterprise to discuss those type of issues around recruitment, around diversity, equity, and inclusion, around um, 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 securing talent, around best performing groups or teams. We have that type of resourcing and discussions available. We have, even during the pandemic, we've done it virtually. We have a quarterly team meeting where we spend a day or two having discussions around this type of conversations, the trends in fundraising, the trends in mayor gifts and plan giving, philanthropic advisors work. Um, and we have opportunities to have exchange. I made the commitment, and this is something that I always ask them when anyone goes to a conference or gets a new certification, etc. I make sure that they have a time, an hour, 90 minutes to make a full presentation and share the knowledge that they have with
Ooh.
the entire team. So I'm not the only voice of authority, but there's also others in the team that come from different backgrounds and ages. And one of the richness of my team is I have one of the most diverse teams of the organization in terms of ethnicity, in terms of race and age. I have millennials and I
Yes.
have baby boomers on my team, and I have women and men, etc. on the team, and they're very happy to have that diversity as well. But it's always having. I learned long time ago from a captain of the marketing industry. He told me, Franklin, always focus. I remember professorial words. He says that every good meeting needs to have honesty, and it needs to have cordiality, and tell the truth without meanness, without being mean to one another. And so we always try to hold each other accountable in a good way, in an honest way, and we learn. And learning sometimes is painful, right? And so we try to do that. And my leadership style is to be consultative as much as I can, democratic, and always allow people to have a say in their own destiny as professionals.
This is amazing. So we started talking about trust, and I think if there was a trust measure, my trust in the work that you're doing with AARP is through the roof now. So thank you so very
Thank you.
much. I think we can always count on you to, maybe not know what the answer is, but to have thought about it deeply and to include the opinions of others to reach the best possible outcome.
or
You,
or point you to the right person or the right resource. That's also what I see my work as, someone that can point to the right direction. I don't need to have all the answers, and I really like when I have members of my team that are even experts of something more than me. uh, that to me is, I think, the art of leadership.
Thank you so much. So, folks, if you'd like to ask Franklin more questions, I'm going to venture, Franklin, that it's okay to connect with you on LinkedIn.
Yeah, absolutely.
And for everybody that's been here, we appreciate you. We appreciate learning together with you, helping us ask Franklin those tough questions. And if you'd like to join the Donor Participation Project, let me put up the link on the screen. And we hope you have a great and productive rest of the afternoon. Thanks, everybody.
Thank
Thanks,
you so
Franklin.
much. Appreciate it. Thanks, Luis.